Hello and welcome to BYJU'S IAS. Let's take up the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper by looking at an article from the front page of the Delhi edition. The city of Hyderabad has been hit by massive floods because of heavy rainfall brought in by a deep depression in the Bay of Bengal. This disaster has brought the city to a halt. It has killed more than 16 people, and the city's communication and transportation infrastructure has been destroyed, including highways, flyovers, railway networks, etc. This event has been covered in today's newspaper through a couple of articles on page number 1 and page number 8. And this brings us to the topic of urban flooding in Indian cities. So in this context, let's have a detailed discussion on urban flooding and understand the causes and factors responsible for urban flooding. And we shall also discuss its impact, and we will talk about the solution through which we can mitigate the impact of this disaster. See, Indian cities are not new to urban flooding. Be it coastal cities such as Mumbai or Chennai, or be it the landlocked cities of Delhi and Bengaluru, or be it smaller cities like Srinagar or Patna, they are all hit by incidents of urban flooding every year, especially during the monsoon season. Such repeated incidents of urban flooding are primarily caused by three factors. That includes meteorological, hydrological and human factors. The meteorological factors include heavy rainfall caused by cyclonic storms and thunderstorms. Then hydrological factors includes the blockage of water channels and drainage network. And the man-made factors include land use changes, surface sealing due to rapid urbanization. So considering these three different causes that contribute to urban flooding, it is quite difficult to classify urban flooding as a natural disaster or as a man-made disaster. But if you carefully evaluate the recent incidents of urban flooding in these Indian cities, it becomes very clear that urban flooding is more of a man-made disaster than a natural disaster. Yes, natural factors such as heavy rainfall, blocked drainage channels, even they contribute to urban flooding. But man-made factors such as unplanned, unsustainable urbanization is the root cause of urban flooding, especially in Indian cities. Basically, man-made factors aggravate the impact of natural causes, thereby turning heavy rainfall in urban areas into a flooding disaster. Rapid and haphazard urbanization, which is largely unplanned and unsustainable, has led to massive destruction of the natural drainage in Indian cities, thereby turning incidents of heavy rainfall into a flooding disaster. Natural drainage in urban areas, comprising mainly of water channels in the catchment area of wetlands and water bodies such as rivers and lakes, has been blocked and destroyed because of unsustainable land use patterns. Wetlands and water bodies such as rivers and lakes, and the water channels that drain into them in their catchment areas, they have been encroached and destroyed by private builders and as well as by government agencies. Illegal encroachment and construction activities on the floodplains drastically reduces the water carrying capacity of the drainage channel, and hence whenever there is excess rainfall, the water spills over and floods the nearby low-lying areas. Then along with this, massive pollution and unscientific waste management in urban areas leads to blockage of water channels, which further reduces the carrying capacity of the drainage system. Then upon this, excessive concretization in urban areas seals the surface and reduces the percolation of water into the groundwater table. In many cases, the urban local bodies that are primarily responsible for enforcing the bylaws and regulations, they have failed to prevent encroachment and the blockage of water channels, and they have failed to develop the urban areas in a sustainable, environment-friendly manner. So these man-made factors directly aggravate the impact of natural factors such as heavy rainfall and turn these incidents into an urban flooding disaster, thus making urban flooding more of a man-made disaster than a natural disaster. Such urban flooding incidents have a severe impact on the city, and it brings the city to a standstill. Such sudden incidents of urban flooding can result in severe loss of lives, especially in vulnerable areas such as low-lying areas and slums. Then along with this human cost, urban flooding can even destroy the city's property and infrastructure, which includes not just private property but as well as public infrastructure such as communication networks, transportation systems, electricity grids, etc. Urban flooding incidents are known to destroy telephone lines and internet connectivity, and it also disrupts transportation because of the damage caused to roads, highways, flyovers, railway network, etc. Public transportation such as bus and train services comes to a complete halt, and other essential infrastructure such as electricity and water supply can also be completely disrupted. Urban flooding also pollutes the water bodies and makes the water unfit for human consumption, and this could also promote the spread of a variety of diseases such as cholera, typhoid, dengue, etc. So this devastating impact of urban flooding makes it a considerable challenge for the disaster management authorities and the urban local bodies. And the solution to this disaster lies in the implementation of suitable mitigation and adaptation measures by focusing on disaster risk reduction and by promoting planned and sustainable urban development in the place of unplanned unsustainable urbanization. So as a part of these measures, it is very essential to carry out vulnerability and risk assessment in order to identify the vulnerable cities and the low-lying vulnerable areas in each city. It is also very important to map out the associated risks so that appropriate and suitable mitigation and adaptation measures can be implemented. So this would include the protection and restoration of natural drainage channels by reclaiming the wetlands and floodplains from illegal encroachments, and through the strict enforcement and implementation of land use controls by the urban local bodies as per local bylaws. So the primary responsibility of dealing with encroachments lies with the urban local bodies, and they have to be very effective when it comes to enforcing the local bylaws in order to provide for sustainable land use in urban areas. Then along with this, the urban local bodies will have to closely work with the pollution control authorities to clear the silt and the waste that would have deposited in the water channels, which are also responsible for blocking the drainage channel. Then the urban local bodies and the environment authorities, they have to take adequate steps in order to increase the percolation of groundwater, and such long-term mitigation and adaptation measures are needed in order to tackle urban flooding. The urban local bodies will have to ensure that construction activities, especially in the vulnerable low-lying areas, are strictly regulated, and all these urban settlements will have to be made resilient against urban flooding. Then along with this, improved forecasting and early warning services will enable the disaster management authorities and the local bodies to carry out timely evacuation, and this has to be accompanied with better disaster preparedness at all the levels of the government. This includes the national level disaster management authorities, the state level disaster management authorities, the district level disaster management authorities, along with the urban local bodies. So such a comprehensive response is needed in order to step up disaster preparedness with regard to urban flooding, and these long-term sustainable measures will help in mitigating the impact of these disasters. Now let's take up a column from page number 6 written by Mr. Rohit Dhankar. In this column, the writer evaluates the significance of NGOs or non-government organizations in promoting elementary education in the country. He presents data to illustrate how NGOs are playing a critical role in delivering quality elementary education. This data shows us that there are lakhs of NGOs in India and lakhs of NGO workers who are enabling elementary education in the country by getting directly involved in teaching the students as a part of their voluntary service and by conducting workshops that are dedicated for students and as well as for teachers. Voluntary NGO workers play a crucial role in bridging the gap in teachers by providing voluntary teaching services directly to the students and as well as by conducting special activities and workshops for the students. Several NGOs also specialize in conducting teacher training workshops in order to improve their pedagogy or teaching skills. So through such activities, NGOs have become a crucial link in India's elementary education system, and they have become the backbone for executing several government education schemes. So in short, the quality and reach of elementary education in the country is directly dependent on the capacities and skills of these NGO workers. But unfortunately, this capacity building of NGO workers has been largely neglected by the government, by the universities and by the NGOs as well, thereby affecting the quality of elementary education in the country and as well as the learning outcomes amongst the students and also the quality of teacher training. So if these quality parameters of elementary education has to be improved, then the capacities and the skills of NGO workers has to be strengthened because their direct role in teaching students and in training teachers requires them to understand the goals, values and the objectives of the country's education policies and framework that has been outlined through 4 key documents. This includes the National Curriculum Framework of 2005, the Right to Education Act of 2009, the National Curriculum Framework for Teacher Education of 2009, and the most recent National Education Policy of 2020. These 4 documents lay down the framework and policies for elementary education, and they contain several goals, values and objectives which has to be first understood by the NGO worker. Because the success of these education schemes and education policies are directly dependent on the ability of the NGO worker to first understand the goals, values and the objectives that have been outlined in these key policy documents. For example, the RTE Act mandates that elementary education should focus on learning outcomes by encouraging activity-based learning, by promoting discovery and exploration in a child-friendly manner. So for an NGO worker who is involved in direct teaching, he needs to understand what is discovery and he needs to realize the importance of activity-based learning, because only then he would be able to engage in constructive pedagogy that would eventually lead to improvements in the quality of education. Similarly, the National Education Policy of 2020 talks about making students good, successful, innovative, adaptable and productive human beings by focusing on essential skills such as scientific temper, evidence-based thinking, creativity, innovativeness, communication skills, health, physical education, etc. It also focuses on other essential skill sets such as logical reasoning, digital literacy, coding, and as well as on values such as ethical and moral values and constitutional principles in order to make the students understand fundamental duties and make them value-based responsible citizens of the country. Then the National Curriculum Framework for Teacher Education of 2009 mandates that teacher training should focus on values of peace, democratic way of life, constitutional and democratic principles such as equality, justice, liberty, fraternity and secularism. And if these values and principles have to be inculcated in our teachers and students, then every NGO worker would have to first understand the significance of these goals, values and objectives that have been laid down in these education policies. So for this, it is very essential to strengthen the capacities and skills of our NGO workers. And hence, the writer is calling upon the government and the NGOs to stop this neglect with regard to capacity building of NGO workers and provide them with the required skill sets through capacity building programs so that they would be able to deliver on the goals, values and objectives of India's education policies. Now let's take up another column written by Mr. Chidambaram Iyer. In this column, the writer evaluates India's ambition of establishing itself as a manufacturing hub for mobile phones and mobile accessories. So in order to achieve this ambitious objective and to boost domestic mobile production, the Indian government has come out with 2 schemes, which includes the Phased Manufacturing Program or PMP and the Production Linked Incentive Scheme or PLI. The Phased Manufacturing Program was launched in 2016-17 and it was supposed to incentivize and promote domestic mobile production and domestic value addition to the mobile industry until 2019-20. Under this program, the government increased the basic customs duty in order to restrict the import of mobile accessories and mobile components from abroad in order to incentivize and promote the domestic manufacturing industry, which includes the participation of foreign firms as well. Under the PMP program, several subsidies were also announced by the government in order to boost domestic production. And as a result of this program, over the last 3 to 4 years, domestic production in value terms has definitely increased in India, but unfortunately, there has been no substantial value addition. Data from the annual survey of industries shows that value addition in the mobile sector is less than 10% in India. And this doesn't help India to achieve its objectives even though the value of domestic production has gone up under the PMP program. This basically means that Indian mobile companies and even foreign mobile companies based out of India, they are producing more mobile phones and mobile accessories in India, but they are not investing in carrying out any substantial value addition. It means that these mobile companies are merely importing the components from abroad and they are just assembling them in India. But if India wants to establish itself as a mobile manufacturing hub, then those components, they have to be produced in India. They have to be designed and developed in India. And it is this value addition which is needed to set up India as a manufacturing hub for mobile phones and mobile accessories. Just increasing the value of domestic production through assembly of mobile phones and accessories won't be sufficient. And this is where India is seen to be falling behind as compared to other mobile manufacturing hubs such as China, Vietnam and South Korea. Data from the United Nations shows that these countries are actually exporting more mobile phones and mobile accessories as compared to their mobile imports. It means that there is value addition going on in these countries wherein the components are actually being designed and produced within those countries. But in contrast, the data shows that even though the value of domestic production has gone up under the PMP program, its imports are still 25 times higher than its exports. This shows that the Indian companies and the foreign companies that are producing mobile phones and accessories in India, they are merely assembling them in India and there is no local value addition that is going on because they are just importing the readily available mobile components from abroad, especially from markets such as China, Vietnam and South Korea. So this pattern of growth in India's mobile sector will not really help India establish itself as a manufacturing hub because rival countries such as China, Vietnam and South Korea, they are way ahead of India when it comes to making value addition in their mobile sector. Then along with this drawback of the phased manufacturing program, it has another disadvantage. The disadvantage is that since the government has increased customs duty on certain imports of mobile components, it can create issues with regard to WTO rules. For example, Chinese TAPE has already filed a complaint against India at the WTO by alleging that its increase in custom duty under the PMP program is violative of the WTO rules, and this could end up making the local assembly of mobile phones unattractive. And if the case goes against India, it could also affect all the investments that have been made earlier under this program. Then along with the PMP program, just last week, the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology has launched the Production Linked Incentive Scheme, and it has selected around 16 companies, which includes Indian companies and as well as foreign firms, in order to incentivize them to focus on domestic production for furthering India's ambition of establishing itself as a mobile manufacturing hub. But unfortunately, this new scheme also falls short of the expectation because it is entirely focused on promoting domestic production and it does not focus on value addition. See, for example, under the Production Linked Incentive Scheme, India's domestic production of mobile phones might go up, but those phones won't be competitive when compared to other phones produced in other markets, and it won't lead to any value addition in the Indian market. According to a recent study, the subsidies and incentives provided by India is simply not sufficient as compared to other peers, because in countries such as China, a mobile phone which costs around 100 rupees to produce can be sold at as low as 79.55 rupees because of the massive subsidies and incentives provided by the Chinese government. Similarly, in Vietnam, the cost falls to just 89, whereas in India, the cost remains very high at 92. And it clearly shows that the incentives and subsidies being provided are not sufficient to promote value addition and to promote export competitiveness with other rival markets. Then another challenge for India is that even though the value of domestic production has gone up, the domestic Indian companies are focused on producing only low-cost phones and accessories which are serving the low-income markets, and they are not competitive enough to produce high-end mobiles and high-end accessories that are exported to high-income markets. This deficiency of Indian domestic companies can be filled by the foreign firms such as Apple and Samsung, but the problem is that these foreign MNCs, they are focused only on assembling the mobile phones in India, and they are not looking at carrying out any domestic value addition. Even though these foreign firms have set up assembling and manufacturing plants in India, they still import the components from their suppliers who are located abroad. So in this context, the writer says that the policies of the Indian government should focus on value addition and not just on the value of domestic production, and it should incentivize the foreign MNCs to move and co-locate their supply chains to India in order to reduce their import dependency. Because foreign MNCs such as Apple and Samsung, they are dependent on a number of suppliers who are located in their home countries. And the policy focus of the Indian government should be not just on incentivizing these mobile manufacturers, but also to incentivize them to co-locate or move their supply chain ecosystem as well. Because that is when real value addition will take place in the Indian market. And this will help India realize its ambition of establishing itself as a mobile manufacturing hub. Now let's take up the practice questions for today. Which of the following statements are correct? The Graded Response Action Plan provides for a set of air pollution control measures for the whole country. It is implemented and enforced by the respective state governments. Measures are taken under the GRAP based on the air quality index and pollution data brought out by the SUFFER system. Amongst the given statements, the first and the second statements are incorrect. So it's only the third statement which is correct, and hence option C is the right answer. See, the Graded Response Action Plan provides for a set of air pollution control measures only for the Delhi NCR region, not for the entire country. And this action plan is implemented and enforced by the Environment Pollution Prevention and Control Authority, which has been constituted by the Supreme Court and not by the state governments. The Supreme Court of India has constituted a dedicated authority known as the EPCA, which works in close coordination with the central government, the state governments and the pollution control authorities in order to tackle the menace of pollution, especially air pollution in the Delhi NCR region, which reaches its peak during the winter season. This question has been asked because we have a related article on page number 2. According to this article, there will be a ban on diesel generators in the NCR region from today. See, as I mentioned, to deal with the challenge of air pollution in the Delhi NCR region, the Supreme Court of India had constituted the Environment Pollution Control Authority. This authority has the powers to implement and enforce a series of restrictive measures in order to reduce the emission of air pollutants before and during the winter season in order to tackle the environmental challenge that the Delhi NCR region faces every year. So based on the air quality index and the extent of particulate matter present in the air, and based on data obtained from the SUFFER system, which stands for System of Air Quality and Weather Forecasting and Research, the EPCA implements and enforces a series of predetermined measures such as pollution control measures in thermal power plants, ban on burning of garbage, ban on the usage of diesel generators, regulation of construction and cleaning activities, and even going to the extent of shutting down power plants and stopping the entry of diesel trucks and vehicles, and as well as the stoppage of construction activities and the introduction of odd-even scheme if required. Now let's take up the next question. Which amongst the given institutions procures pulses from farmers at MSP rates and maintains a buffer stock? The correct answer is option B, NAFED. This question has been asked because we have a related article on page number 10. See, NAFED stands for National Agricultural Cooperative Marketing Federation of India. This institution is primarily responsible for procuring, marketing, and storage of agricultural and horticultural products. And as a part of this mandate, it procures pulses from farmers at MSP rates in order to moderate the retail prices whenever there is a mismatch in the demand-supply equation. According to this article, currently there is a severe shortage of pulses in the market which has increased their prices, and hence the central government has decided to release these pulses to state governments from the buffer stock that is held by NAFED. Now let's take up the next question. The primary objective of Deen Dayal Antyodaya Rashtriya Aajeevika mission is to create livelihood opportunities, especially for women in rural areas. Option A is the right answer. This question has been asked because according to this article on page number 10, the Union Cabinet has approved changes to the Deen Dayal Antyodaya Rashtriya Aajeevika mission in order to increase the coverage of beneficiaries in Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh. Now let's take up the next question. Which of the following statements are correct with regard to the STARS project that has been recently approved by the government? It is partially funded by the World Bank. It will help in improving assessment systems, facilitating school to work transition, strengthening classroom instruction and strengthening the governance of school education. A major component of the project is the establishment of PARAKH, Performance Assessment, Review and Analysis of Knowledge for Holistic Development, as a national assessment center. It is included under the National Education Policy of 2020. All the four statements are correct. Option D is the right answer. This question has been asked because according to this article on page number 10, the Union Cabinet has approved the STARS project or the STARS program, which is partially funded by the World Bank. And this project has been designed to introduce governance reforms in school education. It will primarily focus on improving data and assessment systems at the national level, and it is designed to improve teaching and learning outcomes in 6 selected states. STARS project stands for Strengthening Teaching, Learning and Results for States, and it also includes emergency response measures, especially to deal with the disruption caused to learning because of closure of schools during disasters such as the current COVID-19 pandemic. Under this project, an institution known as PARAKH will be set up, and it will act as the National Assessment Center. These provisions have been contained in the National Education Policy of 2020, and the Union Cabinet has approved this program, which is applicable for Himachal Pradesh, Rajasthan, Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, Kerala and Odisha. The program in these states will be sponsored by the World Bank along with the Government of India, whereas for other states, the Asian Development Bank shall be sponsoring the STARS project. Now let's take up the next question. Which of the following statements are correct? The United Nations Human Rights Council or UNHRC has 47 members elected for staggered 3-year terms. Seats are allocated on a regional group basis to ensure geographical representation. The members are elected by the UN Security Council. Amongst the given statements, the third statement is incorrect, so option B is the right answer. See, the third statement is incorrect because members to the UNHRC are elected by the members of the UN General Assembly, not by the UN Security Council. This question has been asked because according to this article on page number 13, Pakistan has been re-elected to the UNHRC. Now let's take up the next question. Which of the following statements are correct? India's public debt ratio has largely remained stable at about 70% of the GDP since 1991. It is projected to jump by 17 percentage points to almost 90% because of an increase in public spending and fall in tax revenue and economic activity due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Broadly, the pattern of public debt in India is close to the norm around the world. All the three statements are correct. Option D is the right answer. See, these factual points about India's public debt ratio has been brought out through an IMF report that has been published on page number 14 of today's newspaper. Now let's take up a practice question from the 2016 prelims paper. With reference to Stand Up India scheme, which of the following statements are correct? Its purpose is to promote entrepreneurship amongst SC, ST and women entrepreneurs. It provides for refinancing through SIDBI. Both the statements are correct. Option C is the right answer. Finally, let's take up a couple of mains practice questions. The first question, write a detailed note on urban flooding in India. The second question, the government's neglect of NGOs engaged in educational improvement has become a weak link in the elementary education chain. Critically evaluate. Kindly write an answer to these questions and post your answers in the comment section below. I hope this has been a useful session, so kindly provide your valuable feedback by liking and sharing our videos and by commenting below. So this concludes our discussion for the day. Thanks for watching.